Hi, what's up? Uh, I'm gonna do something that I was supposed to do a long time ago and never did. I'm finally gonna make this video about The Last of Us, Part 2. Uh, I've been writing this script for honestly a while now. The first part of it I wrote like right after I played the game, so that was like when it came out, like the week after. Um, the second part of it, like the main part of it, I guess, I wrote like, man, I finished it up like maybe the week before the show came out. This isn't going to be about the show at all. I know that's what the discussion around the game is right now, or the content, I guess. But this isn't that at all. Um, so yeah, I bought all of this stuff. I've wanted to, as I said in the previous video, I wanted to do YouTube for a while now. And I've always just been putting it off because, oh, I don't have this, I don't have that. I finally got all the stuff I needed, um, and I moved, so all my stuff is in storage. So I don't have like the lighting. I don't really have any of the stuff I thought I was gonna have. And I was like, you know what? Damn it! I'm gonna stop putting off making this video. So here it is. Here's the video. Um, Enjoy it, or just watch it and hate it. I don't, do whatever you want. I don't care. When I first started The Last of Us Part 2, my senses were on high alert. After the game's short loading image and emotion-filled and blood-splattered Ellie was showcased for a few moments, the screen goes black. There I waited, with bated breath, anticipating the journey I was about to embark on, courtesy of Naughty Dog. Much like Fellowship of the Ring, the first major stimuli introduced to your senses in The Last of Us Part 2 is not imagery, but sound. Waves slowly crashing upon land, and periodically a soft wooden thud. It's serene, calm, and peaceful as the opening credits flash by. It continues while you go through the initial display and accessibility settings. When the title screen finally revealed itself to me for the first time, I was initially confused. A small motorboat sits in the body of water, ever so softly being pushed up against the wooden post it's tied to. Nothing more can be seen through the heavy mist that permeates the area. I sat for a moment trying to understand why the developers made this choice. Looking back at the first entry into the story, the title screen easily captured the essence of that game and told you everything you needed to know. A window on a dilapidated wall, sunlight peering into the room, illuminating parts of the worn and weathered drapes as they slightly billow in the breeze. Overgrown vegetation begins to sneak into the house through the window. This all fits perfectly with the themes of The Last of Us. I sat and played through part 2 for about 4 or 5 straight nights, usually playing the game for about 5 hours or so, unless I was at like a critical point, the end of a day or a chapter, and I needed to finish it. Then I might play through the whole night. All the while, that title screen had no more significance than it did the first time I saw it. Less, even. As I got further into the game, I began to ask myself, what does this even have to do with anything? Most of the time, however, I didn't think about it. I would look at it briefly, then just continue on the next leg of the journey for that night. So on my last night of playing the game, as I fought through the slave compound searching for my quarry, as I was led down to where those that attempt to flee are left to die, as I confronted my adversary and walked to where the final showdown would take place, I saw that boat bobbing in the water, and I felt visceral emotion. This is it, I thought. Can't believe it. This was there the entire time. How long had that boat sat there? How long were those two tied to those posts? Could they see the boats from where they were left to die? Once you finish the game, you're brought back to the title screen. But it's different now. The waves still crash, but there's no fog. It looks like it's the same boat, but on a different shore, with the sun shining and a domed building in the background. Initially, this made as much sense to me as the first title screen did. I thought this was the beach Ellie docked at when she reached California, but on researching further, turned out to be the supposed base of the Fireflies, which is a message I can understand. Abby and Lev reached their destination. Good on them. I bring this up first because there's not a lot I don't like about this game. I've played through this game like at least 5 times now, and sometimes I wonder why do I keep playing this game, but we'll get to that later. I bring this up because honestly, it's one of the only things I dislike about the game. When you're playing it through a second time, like if you want to stream it, or you want to just play with someone who hasn't seen it before, in the same room or whatever, you can't go back to that first loading screen. It's just gone. It's always going to be the second one. And I don't know if that's just because I'm playing on like Plus or whatever. I don't know if you go back through a clean run if it'll start with that image again. But every time I've done it, it's just been the second one. And it's upsetting that like I can't ever showcase that. Like no one else that I play the game with can experience that the way that I did. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Looking back, I think water and boats have a lot more to do with this game than I initially thought. And not just because boat traversal is a lot more frequent in this installment, but for many different, subtler, more thought-provoking reasons. Water is deeply connected with the moon and also emotion. Boats have to symbolize staying afloat above vast, unknowable darkness. Ellie's rage all but consumes her in part two. And I think the boat ride to the aquarium symbolized it the best. On her way to commit the most heinous act in the game.
Bad dog. Bad dog.
Ellie must make her way through this crazy storm that's been building up the whole game. Oh, a storm's coming. Storm's approaching. Actually, I think they talk about that in Abby's side, not Ellie's, but whatever. I'm not sure if I'm just feeling this way because I've lived in Seattle and I know what that area is supposed to look like. But those enormous waves threatening to overtake the boat just stirred this real sense of like fear within me. Like okay, when you're out in nature and you see like enormous mountains, like that deep almost reverence you get when you look at something insurmountable in nature. That's the feeling that I got. Some people call that the fear of God. Some people just, I don't know what other people call it, but yeah. Anyway, even though civilization is, or what's left of it, is still behind you, it's like the ocean is right there, the biggest ocean. It's come to meet you. And yeah, I don't know, it was just another point of intense emotion that I felt while playing the game. That part and the last part were definitely big hitters for me.
I know this means nothing to you guys, but I lost my shit when I first saw this.
And as you travel through Seattle, you see a dichotomy that wasn't really present in the first game. On the one hand, you have the raw, uncontainable power of the greatest force the world has ever known, the ocean. Ravenous, uncontrollable masses of water have beaten into the fallen city for a quarter of a century, tearing away everything humanity once built up. Any semblance of structure, society, civilization is eroded away like jagged rocks in a riverbed. Once seemingly permanent and indestructible streets and buildings have washed down the current. Perhaps this is an analogy for that all-consuming rage, hurt, and grief Ellie feels on her quest of vengeance, tearing down the very fabric of the society the WLF built in the rubble of the old world with each kill she makes. Not thinking or feeling for those in the path of her waves as she rushes towards her target. But I think we have to ask ourselves, did the WLF need to be torn down? Water can be seen as destructive, sure, but it's also very cleansing. Without water, we have no civilization, no life even. Stagnation leads to rot, mold, decay, sickness. Water as a force of nature is essential to the survival of the planet. Its flowing currents are the lifeblood of the world, and in this situation, it's cutting new paths of life into the fallen city. In a sense, the old world must be pruned to make way for what will come next. Water, the strongest force known to man. Its nature is to find peace and equilibrium. It always flows downward until it gets to where it needs to go, to where it finds that peace. As Ellie says when she and Dina are first captured in Seattle, which is also the name of the trophy for beating the game in permadeath, you can't stop this. Water works the same way. Perhaps Ellie is a storm of grief, sending destructive tsunami-like waves of rage to destroy what's left of society, of the WLF. Or maybe Ellie is acting as a fresh new current, breaking down old tired ways of society, no longer viable in the world, softening the rough edges of civilization so that it may change into something bigger, something better. Maybe it's a bit of both. At any rate, it harkens back to Joel's choice in the first game, which, now that the show has come out, I suppose, is relevant again, which is funny because I never talked about this before, but, whatever. I like The Last of Us Part 1. When it first came out, I was 15, so I didn't get to play it for a while. I wasn't really allowed to play, games that I couldn't buy, and I wasn't 17, so I couldn't buy it. Anyway, I had to watch lots of Let's Plays and stuff. First, I think it was with Tobuscus, but then he didn't finish it, so maybe with PewDiePie or something. Anyway, don't judge me. This was 2013. Anyway, when I finally did get my hands on it, I already knew a lot of what was going on, and I thought the gameplay was kind of lackluster. A lot of walking, mostly walking. So it took me a while to beat the game, but eventually I did. Once or twice at first. Um, I thought I did it on a grounded run, but I think I just did it on hardened because grounded isn't unlocked right away. But anyway, I have since beat it on grounded a couple times. Anyway, the ending of that game is not complete. Tell me to my face, you played through that game and didn't wonder what was going to happen next. That's because the story wasn't over. I played part 2 the week it came out, like I said before. I ignored all spoilers and all discussion beforehand because I didn't care. I never care. I barely even watch trailers. So I played usually from around 10 to 11 p.m. for about 3 or 4 hours, unless a big part was coming up, the end of a day, and I need to finish that. If I remember correctly, which it's been a few years, so who knows. I think I played through on normal or hardened, whatever the hardest difficulty is, because Grounded wasn't out yet. I beat the game and was like, oh my god, I need to play that again. But again, Grounded wasn't out yet. So I tried to tweak the settings for the difficulty to try and make it like Grounded by turning off the HUD, raising the enemy difficulty. By the way, the difficulty in this game is insanely customizable, by the way, more so than I've seen in any other game. The accessibility is really good too, but regardless. A day into playing my new customized Grounded, the actual Grounded release patch released. So I abandoned that playthrough and then I started again. Later I played through a third time because my girlfriend at the time hadn't seen it. And then I played through 1 or 2 more times just for the hell of it. And then I just played through again recently. There's a playthrough on the channel where I was playing with some Discord friends. I'm a bit of an achievement hunter, so I like to get all the achievements in games if I can. I'd like to 100% them, like Miles Morales, stuff like that. So a lot of these playthroughs, I was just trying to 100% complete the game. I still haven't done it yet. I haven't beat it on permadeath, and I haven't gotten all the collectibles. I think you only need to play through 2 times to get everything, but yeah, I haven't, so, weird. But anyway, gameplay-wise, this game honestly perfectly expands on what the first game offered, especially at the higher difficulties. If you've heard many Last of Us video essays or podcasts or whatever, you may already know a lot of this stuff, but the game and enemies, they feel more real. The stealth is actually viable. There's nothing groundbreaking. There's no grapple hook or no radical shift from the gameplay of the part one. It's still The Last of Us, but it's damn fun to play, and I just kept coming back for a while. Like I said before, I honestly couldn't really figure out why. Um, but I feel like The Last of Us Part 2 was absolutely necessary. The first game was not a complete story. It was in the sense that the mission was completed and it was time to go home. Like, it's the end of that chapter, sure. But the game ends with Joel making a huge, potentially world-altering decision, and we never see any of the consequences that come of it, good or bad. I don't know if it was, but I feel like The Last of Us Part 2 was always planned to be made. Part 1 and Part 2, to me, come together to make one cohesive and compelling story. So, here's my take on how. Part 1 is about Joel's loss and finding humanity again through Ellie, as everyone knows, his surrogate daughter. The entire game centers around how their relationship slowly builds, and then Joel is once again presented with a situation in which he could lose his daughter. No matter the reason for it, there's no way he can accept that, and he makes the decision to kill the Fireflies and take Ellie back to live with him and his brother in Jackson. Part 2 starts by first dealing with the repercussions of Joel's decision. Joel ends up losing Ellie anyway, because he took away her agency and lied to her about it, creating this rift in their relationship as she drifted away. That all happens in the first game. To not have a conclusion to that isn't a complete story. That was a loose end that clearly warranted a sequel.
I'll go back. But we're done.
The first game is the logical end of the story, but not the emotional one. Just like Ellie's time on the farm. Could Ellie have stayed with Dina and let go? Could the game have ended there? Sure. But there was still more to do. Honestly, when I first played through, I thought the game was going to end there. I was like, no way, they're just stopping it here. But once the PTSD started kicking, I was like, okay, yeah, we gotta do more.
Oh no.
The main story of part 2 is about Ellie's loss and rejecting Joel after his decision, and losing him right after deciding herself to try and forgive him. Realizing she wasted the last 3 years of their time together resenting Joel, a grief-stricken Ellie goes on a relentless, near-obsessive warpath, losing everything she held dear in the process, trying to reconcile her guilt in the name of revenge. Which, conversely, we learned was Abby's story before the second game began, in the middle of part 1 and 2. After losing her father, she went to join the Wolves in Seattle with Owen. Instead of moving on, she was unable to release herself of her grief and chose revenge, deteriorating her relationship with Owen, who eventually moved on to be with Mel. She finally gets her revenge, and all of her friends die for it. Just like Ellie, she loses everything. But there's still an entire half of the game left.
Dad?
Abby then goes on the story Joel did in part 1. I think Donkey says this in his video. It's the hardened killer who rediscovers their humanity with the help of an innocent child companion they're tasked with protecting. She mirrors Joel in that she sacrifices everything for the new love she's found, ultimately leaving the Wolves in the end, and even being instrumental in their leader being killed. This is why Abby's story doesn't revolve around Ellie's actions like some people thought it should. She's making her own decisions that will have their own consequences. Would Abby have saved Lev from being killed to manufacture a cure? It's difficult to say, right? But the parallels are there. In the end, Abby suffers a fate similar to Joel's. After her various decisions to save Lev, she's off to home, to find the Fireflies again.
Check this street a week.
But she's taken unaware and tortured, albeit much longer than Joel was. And her companion is also captured and tortured as well, so she might have got it worse. In the end, though, her decision to spare Ellie against her friend's wishes in the beginning led to Ellie saving both Abby and Lev from certain death. Ellie returns home, broken but resolved. Abby and Lev make it to the Fireflies, not explicitly, but seemingly implied in the new game completed menu, as we discussed before. Now, these stories are truly complete. No loose ends. Every major action we took part in is accounted for. The Fireflies are rebuilding, The Seraphites and the Wolves are tearing each other apart, possibly in the upcoming standalone multiplayer game. By the way, if so, that's what's happened. I'm Team Scars all the way. I just like their aesthetic. I think it's so cool. Like with the fucking, the bow and arrows and the, you know, all the crazy sayings they have. I love that vibe. It's great. Anyway, these two games are one long story involving three main components: Joel, Ellie, and Abby. It's all of their story almost equally, even though Abby isn't introduced until the second part. The sequel could come from this, but that one might have to do extra work to justify using the same characters again. Maybe it's Abby and Lev's journey with the Fireflies. I heard someone say something like it could be a prequel with Joel and Tommy. I think that'd be cool. But narratively, I believe this book is officially closed.
To have ever gamed.
Part 2. Destruction for the sake of empathy and love. What is violence? What steps are necessary to take in resistance to a broken system? Can killing be justified? I've had to ask myself a lot why I played this game so much. Could never really figure out what drew me to it, It's fun, but it's bloody and gruesome. It's violent and gory. But it's a story about people who live in an apathetic, hate-filled world, choosing empathy and love. Growing as individuals and choosing sacrifice and forgiveness. And fighting for those choices. Fighting for love. That's what I feel like the game has always been about. Love. At first, it seems as though Joel fails to choose sacrifice in the first game. He has no ties to the Fireflies. On the surface, the choice is simple. Save your daughter or let her die. But Joel sacrifices the chance of the cure, as things going back to normal. That's, potentially and relatively, but we'll get to that later. At first, I thought Joel made an error here. I believe the error was that he failed to consider anything outside of himself. That was his fatal flaw, and he died because of it. Joel loved Ellie and killed to save her, but failed to consider her or anyone else in his actions. But looking back, I think it's more complicated than that. Like making a decision for a child they're not yet ready to make. Having more foresight and acting accordingly. Abby chooses to leave her new family in the wolves and chooses love and empathy with Lev and the other one whose name I can't remember. She gets her wings clipped and she, dies. Anyway, she chooses to stop making them the other. She chooses to see them as people. This is the same choice Ellie makes when she spares Abby in the end. I've heard a lot of people discussing the ending and not really understanding and feeling like it's left ambiguous, but I feel like it harkens back to that last conversation with Joel for a reason, because that is the point where she is deciding, no, I can't forgive you. I can't, but I want to try. And I feel like that's the point that she's reached with Abby. Abby's done unforgivable things and ruined her life in a way that she never felt possible, but she understands, just like she understood wasting all that time with Joel, that in the end, all of this hate that she harbors, all of the damage that she's doing, in the end, is affecting her. You know what they say about, revenge, when you go on revenge quest, whatever, dig 2 graves, which I think is actually the achievement name for the grounded difficulty, dig 2 graves. Yeah. Anyway, there are 2 types of sacrifice in these games: sacrificing what you love from a place of imbalance, and sacrificing everything for what you love from a place of love. Joel sacrifices everything for the life of Ellie, so she can live and have a good life. Ellie sacrifices that life in her grief. That's also a possibility because the ending is ambiguous, because she's got the little bracelet from Dina. Anyway, Abby first sacrifices her life and her grief, like Ellie, then takes Joel's path and sacrifices everything for the life of Lev. They're sacrificing what you love and sacrificing for what you love. I feel about this game sort of how I used to feel about natural disasters as a kid. They fascinated me, perhaps for the same reason, societal collapse. I used to not really understand the feeling of secretly wishing for systemic collapse. You know, of course, I don't wish for suffering.
This part is just straight up.
Yet I hoped they truly don't have the virus figured out. You know, I wish the destructive storms would hit our area. Looking back, I now believe it's a deeper wish that the system, which was designed to keep us oppressed, is done away with. Desire to be free of a society not built for me. Not for chaos, but for an end to unnecessary suffering. I desire for the waves to come crashing into the city, tearing down the archaic ways of thinking and being. For nature to grow back into the overly structured, unnatural world we've encased ourselves in. So I'm going to talk about this, not because the show came out, but again, I feel like it's now a little bit more relevant because the show is out. And if you'd like to hear my thoughts on the show, I have a podcast called The Spectre of Anti-Blackness. It's on wherever podcasts are. Anyway, you know, I feel like people don't really get Joel and his decision in part one. People seem to give part two like such a critical look, but fail to actually analyze part one in a meaningful way. It just gets like this continuous praise and a lot of discussion about the themes. Of course, there's like people like me who discuss all the stuff online all the time. But I feel like a lot of people just like, at least from what I remember back in the day, maybe I don't have a great memory because I wasn't that involved, but I feel like people were just like, the general outlook, it just wasn't really as opinionated. Like, maybe it's the fact that Joel is a cishet white man protecting an innocent white girl, or whatever. I don't know. But Joel makes his Joel makes his choice to kill the Fireflies, and everyone is just like, "Yep, makes sense. Let's continue." And like, I think most people view the act as morally reprehensible. Don't get me wrong, but don't really care. Like it doesn't affect them. Doesn't seem to be a difficult choice. You know, save your daughter or save humanity. I don't really remember, like it was a while ago, but I feel like there wasn't as much discussion about people being upset not being able to make that decision. At least not as much as people are upset about making the choices in part two. Even though The Last of Us has never been about player choice, it's been about character choice. You don't play as yourself, you play a fully fleshed out and dynamic character with their own thoughts, feelings, goals, ideologies that don't always align with your own. Anyway, here's the question I don't see many people ask, which, now that the show has come out, I feel like it might be being posed a little bit more, because they kind of like explicitly state it in the first episode, and that's, would a cure rollout actually be viable? In part one, it's been a full 20 years since the outbreak. Society has all but crumbled. Millions, if not billions, of people have perished. There are cannibals eating people. The military is executing citizens on a daily. Is there really, truly any return to normalcy in this world? Was this Joel's consideration in his choice to save Ellie? I mean, he's been living in this world for 2 decades. He's seen some shit. Joel might just understand that even with a cure, even if the cure were to happen, could actually be manufactured. They say in the show it couldn't.
And there are no treatments for this, no preventatives, no cures. They don't exist. It's not even possible to make them.
But let's say it could have, right?
Let you take her.
Things would not return to how they were. Ellie's sacrifice would have ultimately been in vain. In the hotel flashback in part 2, Joel says to Ellie,
Something out.
There was no cure. There's nothing that could help these people or anybody else. I know you wish things were different. I wish things were different. But they ain't.
and honestly, I believe he's being genuine when he says that. Anyway, I don't really have much more to say. Good game, excited for part 3, excited for the multiplayer. I'm excited for whatever new IP Naughty Dog is working on. They never miss. And like I said before, there's a podcast if you're into that. Thanks for watching.